Hello and good evening. I'm Ankit and you're watching the Daily News Simplified because today is 10th of July. Now today, as you can see, we'll be discussing 6 important articles, the first of which appeared in the Hindu, the Indian Express as well as the Business Line newspaper. Now if you like this video, please make sure to hit the like button as it keeps us motivated. Now coming back to the first set of articles for the day, which you can see appeared in all these three newspapers, and it highlighted the Prime Minister's recent visit to Russia. Now he was in Russia to attend the 22nd annual meeting between the head of state and head of the government respectively of the both countries, and it resulted into few agreements which we'll look into detail in the discussion. Now, this topic, that is India's relation with a significant global power, it is important from GS paper 2 perspective. Because as you can see, the syllabus, it highlights effects of policies and politics of developed and developing nation and how it impacts India's interest. Further, as you can see, questions have appeared on various deals that have been signed by India with other countries in UPSC mains examination. For example, in the year of 2020, there appeared a question which asked us in detail about the significance of Indo-US defense deals over that of Indo-Russian defense deals. Now you can understand historically, India has relied on Russia for supply of its defense equipments. However, this trend has changed in the recent past because of India's increasing inclination towards the Western countries, primarily being the United States. However, despite all these factors, India enjoys a very close relationship with Russia. For example, in the year of 2000, India elevated its relationship with Russia to that of strategic partnership level. And also, it institutionalized the mechanism of annual summits between these two countries. And this year, it was the 22nd edition of this very annual summit, which was institutionalized back in the year 2000. So you can see that the close relationship between these two countries, which earlier was relegated most to defense deals, and it has become quite wide. That nowadays, economic aspects of the relationships are more talked about in today's newspapers. So let us understand what are the major areas of cooperation between India and Russia and what are its significance. Now, as I've already told you, defense and security cooperation used to be the key pillar between the relation of these two countries. For example, Russia has acted as a major supplier of defense equipments to India, and even today most of the main defense equipments for India's armed forces, they are of Soviet or Russian origin. For example, Indian Army, it utilizes two Russian tanks as its main battle tank. That is T-90 Bhishma tanks as well as T-72 tanks. Whereas the mainstay of Indian Air Force is Sukhoi 30 MKI, which is also of Russian origin. Whereas on the other hand, Indian Navy is concerned, the INS Vikramaditya, which is an aircraft carrier, it was also constructed or built in Russia itself. In addition to, Russia has leased us with a nuclear attack submarine, which is INS Chakra. Also, in the recent past, that was few years back, India procured an anti-aircraft and anti-missile defense system, which was S-400 missile system from Russia itself. So you can understand these technologically superior military systems have been supplied by Russia to India, which highlights close defense and security cooperation between these two countries. Also, India and Russia have engaged in joint research and development of many defense projects. Primarily is the development of BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles. Also, these two countries have involved or indulged in joint production of key military systems. The most talked about recently was the manufacturing of AK-203 assault rifles in the city of Amethi. Now, beyond even defense and security cooperation, India-Russia collaboration extends to other spheres also. For example, India collaborates with Russia in international sphere and also in multilateral organizations. For example, historically, Russia has supported India's interest in United Nations Security Council, and also it favors inclusion of India as a permanent member in nuclear suppliers group. Also, Russia has steadfastly agreed to support India's candidature as a permanent member to the United Nations Security Council. Also, India has actively engaged with Russia in other multilateral bodies such as BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and it has also looking to actively collaborate with Russia for construction of international north-south transport corridor. Now, this transport corridor is quite significant as far as India's economic interest is concerned. Why? Because this transport corridor will then enable India to connect directly with Central Asian republics through Chabahar port and Iran. And also, it will open India to Central Eurasian and Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, etc. Hence, you can see a collaboration with Russia becomes important as far as India's interest in Central Asian republics are concerned. Now, let us understand how India cooperates with Russia in the sphere of trade and economy. And this is the most highlighted aspect of 22nd summit, which you can see earlier. Most of the statements that came out of these annual summits, they focused majorly on defense and security cooperation. But as against the earlier examples, in this summit, the emphasis was more on trade and economic cooperation between these two great nations. Why? Because in the recent past, India's trade with Russia has increased manifold, which touched $65 billion in the year of 2024. Now, this becomes significant because after the Russia-Ukraine war, India has significantly relied on imports of crude oil from Russia because of its cheap nature. Hence, it has increased bilateral trade between these two countries by multiple folds. Also, in this summit, it was highlighted that both India and Russia, it is looking to increase its bilateral trade up till the level of $100 billion in the next few years, that is by the year 2030. And also, the most important aspect in this trade and economic cooperation is the bilateral trade that happens between these two countries. And it is important to note that these trades, they happen with the use of national currencies. That in case of Russia, they use rubles, whereas Indian exporters and importers, they use Indian rupee. So this important mechanism, which in a way was a result of Western sanctions on Russia, has enacted in India's favor as India is looking to internationalize its Indian rupee. Also, this cooperation extends to other areas as well. In the field of nuclear energy, Russia has actively supported India's interest to generate nuclear power by establishing many of the India's nuclear power plant. And the most recent example is the setting up of Kudankulam nuclear reactor in the state of Tamilnadu. Also, these two countries are collaborating in a nuclear power project in the country of Bangladesh, that is Rupur nuclear power project. Also, historically, Russia has actively supported India's interest in space sector. Because as you can remember, India's first satellite, that was Aryabhatta satellite, was sent into space by a Russian launch vehicle. Also, Russia is actively collaborating in training of Indian astronauts who will go to space under the Gaganyaan mission. So, this is what is important as far as space cooperation is concerned. Also, Russia supports India's interest in science and technological sector also, such as establishing of Indo-Russia initiative, which looks to further research conducted in Indian universities, in addition to support of Indian bases in both Arctic as well as Antarctic region. So these are the major areas of collaboration between these two countries, and also how it signifies India's interest in many fields. that support in defense and security cooperation has helped India to maintain its balance of power with its regional rivals such as Pakistan and China. And international multilateral cooperation has enabled India to navigate difficult geopolitical circumstances. On the other hand, trade and economic cooperation, specifically the import of crude oil from Russia, enabled India to maintain a stable inflation levels even in the crisis situation such as Russia-Ukraine war. Whereas collaboration in the field of nuclear science or space sector, it enabled India reach outer space and also construct nuclear power plants with the help of Russia. So this is the major areas of cooperation. Now, after that, let us understand what are the important challenges that the relations between these two countries currently faces. Now, if you remember last slide, I told you that India's trade with Russia has increased manifold in the recent past, and this is due to import of crude oil from Russia. Now, it is also important to note that this import of crude oil has tilted the balance of trade between Russia and India in favor of Russia, because India massively imports crude oil from Russia, whereas on the other hand, India's exports to Russia are comparatively low. Hence, due to this factor, India also utilized its own currency through setting up of Vostro accounts in Russia itself. However, recent reports have highlighted that due to low levels of Indian exports to Russia, most of the Russian importers of Indian goods have been unable to utilize the remaining rupees in their respective Vostro accounts. Also, this trade deficit between India and Russia has tilted India's currency levels with respect to ruble in favor of ruble. That with respect to rubles, Indian rupee is actively witnessing a depreciation of its own currency. So this is the economic challenge, that due to high trade deficit that India enjoys with Russia, it has led to pressures of depreciation on Indian currency, and due to low levels of Indian exports to Russia, we have also witnessed stagnant flow of rupee into the Vostro account, that the Vostro account are still not completely utilized by Russian importers of Indian goods. Now let us understand the challenges which are faced in defense sector. Now I told you historically Russia has been a major supplier of defense equipments to Indian military forces. However, these equipments also require periodic maintenance as well as their modernization. However, due to Western sanctions on Russia, which was imposed after the Russian-Ukraine war, it has jeopardized India's interest as far as conducting maintenance and modernization of its defense equipments are concerned. So as a result, India has to make stopgap arrangements. That is, it had to rely on other countries such as Poland and Georgia to maintain and modify its defense equipments. Hence, it also highlights why India should not rely on imports from Russia, specifically imports such as arm imports. So this is what defense challenge is all about. That even the delivery of S-400 missile systems from Russia was delayed due to these Western sanctions. Now also you can understand India is a growing country as far as military and its economy is concerned. So this also translates into international sphere as the expansion of India's geostrategic interest. The most glorious example in this regard is the India's interest in the Indo-Pacific region, which is heralded by Western democracies such as Australia, Japan, as well as United States. Now, all these parties of the Indo-Pacific construct, which was actively promoted by United States, all these have an anti-Russian outlook. And this, in a way, makes Russia uncomfortable with India's interaction with these handful of countries. Now also, this expansion of geostrategic interest also means that India's inclination towards Western democracies, particularly with that of United States, makes Russia furthermore uncomfortable. Because first of all, to promote American as well as Indian interest, the American and Western democracies along with India, they have coordinated to launch a quadrilateral grouping, while on the other hand Russia witnesses this grouping as an example of Asian NATO. That this grouping, according to Russia, it jeopardizes the Russian sovereignty and it also threatens the Russian security interest in the region as well. So, because of this, India's geostrategic interest and inclination towards the West, it has in a way made Russia uncomfortable, and India has to navigate its both relations, that is, relations with West on one hand, and relations with that of Russia on the other, with a very keen balancing. Further, as you can understand, Russia has been involved with Ukraine for some time because of a war between these two nations. Now, because of this war, I have highlighted that Western nations impose sanctions on Russia. Now, these sanctions made trade with Russia utilizing US dollars more and more difficult. So, as a result, both these countries shifted to an arrangement where the trade happened in local currencies, that is, rubles as well as Indian rupee. However, due to these sanctions, India has been unable to actively trade with Russia utilizing Western financial system. Whereas on the other hand, West, it witnesses India as an active participant with trade with that of Russia. Now, all these two factors jeopardizes India's interest, that is, it jeopardizes India's ability to define strategic autonomy as far as its relation with key partners are concerned. Also, because of Western sanctions on Russia, it has made Russia more and more dependent on countries such as China. Because of this dependency, we can witness increase in Russia and China bonhomie. Now, why is this relation getting deeper and deeper? Because China significantly, even today, relies on imports as well as arm imports from Russia. While on the other hand, as far as Chinese energy interests are concerned, China also depends on Russia by importing crude oil as well as natural gas from Russia. Now, all of these Chinese interests makes China and Russia more and more economically dependent. Now, this Russia and China bonhomie also puts India into a difficult spot. Why? Because as you can understand, India is involved in a border conflict with China, and India wants to contain China's interests in the region. And it historically depended on key partners such as Russia. But when Russia and China getting closer, you can understand India cannot count that much on Russia to contain Chinese expansionism. Understood? So all these factors combined, that is economic challenge and defense challenge between these two countries. Also, India's expansion of interest by increasing inclination towards West also makes Russia uncomfortable. Whereas Russian dependence on China for energy and security needs also makes India uncomfortable. So all of these are key challenges. Now that after we have discussed challenges, let us now understand what should be the ideal way forward between the relations of these two great nations. Now, first, an immediate need of India as far as its security interests are concerned is to undertake modernization of its defense supply. Now, to bypass Western sanctions, India and Russia, they can be involved in co-production of defense equipments that they've done with AK-203 rifles, as well as involving Russian companies to jointly develop new military systems. Because the earlier examples, such as development of BrahMos missile, have been immensely successful. Also, these Russian companies can transfer their technology and then enable manufacturing of Russian systems inside India itself. So, in a way, it will promote domestic defense manufacturing, and it will also reduce the amount of imports that India currently has to make in order to fulfill its security interest. Further, successful joint development such as BrahMos project has also promoted export of these systems to other countries. So you can understand it also increases exports of Indian goods to other countries as well. Now let us understand the need to diversify the trade between these two countries. Now India keenly imports most of the Russian crude oil, and because of decreased level of Indian exports to Russia, I've highlighted that the mechanism of Vostro accounts have faced quite a lot of difficulty. So in a way, we also need to promote Indian exports to Russia. And this can be done by requesting Russia to lower their non-tariff barriers, because these non-tariff barriers, for example of non-tariff barriers on tea, it has harmed India's exports to Russia, because Indian tea is actively demanded in Russian markets, and as Russia has classified tea under the category of fruit and vegetables, these tea which are exported from India into Russia, they are subjected to huge phytosanitary and sanitary restrictions, which are examples of non-tariff barrier. So by lowering the non-tariff barrier, it will promote India's export to Russia, and it will also help India diversify its trade with that of Russia. Further, most of the trade between these two countries are involved between public sector companies. So we also need to diversify this by promoting participation of private sector countries in this regard. Understood? Now also India and Russia, they can actively collaborate in mutual beneficial issues, because if you look at the 22nd annual summit's joint statement, it highlighted Russian support to India's cause for fighting terrorism in the region. Now recently, even Russian cities have been subjected to terrorist attacks, and it highlights the need to curb terrorism with respect to both these two countries, because historically India has been a key country which has been affected by impacts of terrorism, and also Russia has been increasingly facing these terror activities. Now when these two countries, they can actively collaborate not just individually but also in multilateral forums such as United Nations Security Council, and it will also help India to circumvent hold on sanctions which are imposed by countries like China and Pakistan. Now also you have to understand that Russia does not remain a global superpower. However, even today Russia has a significant capacity to act in its neighboring region, primarily the Eurasian region, which houses Central Asian republics. Now I've already highlighted India is looking to increase its presence in Central Asian republic, and this is where Russia can play a key role, because first of all it can help operationalizing the international north-south transport corridor, which will help Indian goods reach Central Asian markets more and more quickly. Further, India and Russia also held quite a significant interest in protecting and promoting multilateralism across the world, because we can witness in the rise of two superpowers, that are US and China. However, as against this possible bipolar world or bipolar world, India and Russia want a multipolar world. And because of that, India and China, it should actively promote multilateralism by promoting reforms in bodies such as UN and actively participating in other multilateral bodies such as SCO, BRICS, etc. So this was all for today's discussion on India's Russian relation. And with this, we move to second set of articles, which you can see appeared in the Hindu and the Indian Express newspaper. Now, if you look closely, these two articles highlight increased terror attacks, especially in the Jammu region of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, also, both of these papers were filled with various op-eds and news articles, which highlighted why Pakistan has been relying more and more on terrorism to check India's rise in the region and also in the world. Now, this news article becomes important from GS paper 3 perspective, because the syllabus highlights state and non-state actors and how they impact India's interest in the region. Further, India's participation or check of global terror, particularly use of active military forces, has been a subject of UPSC question in the past. Because in the past, you can see questions have appeared on India's surgical strike in the Pakistan region. So you can understand this topic becomes important because PYQs have been asked on this particular topic, and this is a key security concern for India, which makes it a lot of coverage in daily newspaper articles. So this topic becomes important from mains examination. Now you have to understand what has been the change in security landscape across the Jammu and Kashmir region in the recent past. Now in the year of 2019, India revocated the Article 370 of the Indian Constitution which extended special status to the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, by revoking this Article 370, the Union government got a stronger hold on the region, which enabled the Indian government to check rise in terror activities. And as a result, in case of terrorism, it witnessed a rapid decline post the revocation of Article 370. In case of terror-related casualties and death of armed force personnel, it witnessed a significant decline, in addition to decline in infiltration from across the border. However, this trend has been changed in the recent months because we witnessed earlier the key area of infiltration and terror attacks was the Kashmir region or the hills region in the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. But recent attacks, be it Kathua attacks or attacks in the area of Raisi, they highlight the examples of increasing in attack in the area of Jammu, which was rather less affected before from the menace of terrorism. So this highlights that the terrorists, they are getting more and more active even in the region of Jammu, which was hitherto untouched by terrorism. Now let us understand why is terrorism on the rise in the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, if highlighted post the revocation of Article 370, the security situation in the region it stabilized, which enabled the government organizations and state actors to promote the participation, especially in the participation of the democratic process. And this increased democratic participation we witnessed by increasing in vote share, especially in the regions of Kashmir in recently concluded elections to 18th Lok Sabha, and also there is upcoming elections to state or legislative assembly of the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. And all these two examples, that is increasing voting participation in Lok Sabha elections and expectation of legislative assembly elections, it highlights the return of this region to political normalcy. Now, this political and economic normalcy that came out as a result of increased security deployment, it made Pakistan uncomfortable. Hence, these terror organizations have been relied upon to make or to disturb the normalcy in the region. Further, as you can understand, there are also military reasons for the rise in terrorism. Because since the year 2020, India has been involved in a border conflict with countries such as China. So there has been increased deployment of armed forces which was shifted from Kashmir region to that of Ladakh as well as Arunachal Pradesh. Now this redeployment of armed forces, it left some gaps in the security grid that was with the Pakistan in the Pakistan occupied Kashmir and the line of control region. Now this gap, it was exploited by terror actors, which also led to a rise in terrorism cases in the region of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, the Pakistan army has relied upon use of terrorism as a strategic region because historically it was unable to check the rise of India through military measures. However, it relied upon a cheaper and more effective terrorism to counter India's rise. And this we can witness in rise in cases of terrorism in the region of Jammu and Kashmir. Because earlier Pakistan relied upon actors which was actively located in Pakistan and they sent these terrorists across the border using the line of control. However, it brought a negative connotation to the Pakistan region in the international sphere. So increasingly, the Pakistan state and non-state actors, they have been utilizing the local terrorist as well as local organization to promote their cause in the region of Jammu and Kashmir. Further, we have witnessed rise of new organizations such as the Resistance Front, which also acts as a front of Pakistan state and non-state actors. Further, these terrorists have been aided by use of newer technologies such as encrypted messaging system as well as drone, which makes job easier for them. So these are the strategic regions that Pakistani army, instead of relying on its own non-state actors, it is actively promoting terrorism in the region of Jammu and Kashmir so as to highlight that India is not witnessing terrorism, rather it is witnessing insurgency from its own territory. And this is what Pakistan wants to convey to the world. However, to promote its own security and sovereignty interests, India needs to menace or try to control this menace of terrorism. Now, India earlier, especially in the period of 2016, in response to Uri terror attacks, India responded to Pakistan in kind with surgical strike across the borders when the soldiers of Indian army, they conducted these operation across enemy lines. Further, in the year of 2019, due to attack on a CRPF convoy in Pulwama, Indian Air Force retaliated in kind by bombing the terror camp which was located in the Balakot region of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in Pakistan. Now, all these two are examples of kinetic response which was utilized by Indian armed forces and Indian political actors to counter the threat of terrorism in Pakistan region. However, more is required to deal with active or rise in terror cases in the region. And this includes bolstering the security measures. First of all, that I have highlighted that currently the border security, or due to lapses in border security, we have witnessed rise in infiltration. So border security needs to be upgraded in order to check the rise in infiltration of terrorists from across the border. Further, the security establishment should also look to increase the capacity of Jammu and Kashmir's local police system, because this police system will be able to actively identify who are the local people who are supporting these terrorists after all. Further, by undertaking developments and capacity building of its intelligence community, and also strictly adhering to the standard operating procedure, will also enable Indian armed forces to minimize its casualty as a response to terror related cases. Further, Indian government should actively undertake confidence building measures also. And this means Indian government should try to normalize the democratic system in the union territory by conducting elections at the earliest possible time, because the democratic system will enable people to channel their grievances according to a democratic setup itself, which will also prevent these terrorism or terrorist actors to invoke this grievances as against actions against Indian state. Further, by giving this region a special economic package, it will also promote jobs in the youth of Jammu and Kashmir, which will also sway them away from these radicalization attempts that have been undertaken by state and non-state actors across the border. Further, India should also utilize its influence in international sector, especially by utilizing foreign policy instrument to name and shame the terrorist groups and agencies which are responsible for terrorist attacks in India. Further, united or multilateral bodies such as United Nations Security Council can be utilized to impose sanctions on terror actors, and also terrorist financing can also be controlled using the mechanism of Financial Action Task Force. So this was all for today's discussion on the second article, and with this we quickly move to the third article of the day, which you can see appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now, back in the year of February 2023, the Indian government, that was Ministry of Corporate Affairs, it constituted a Committee on Digital Competition Law, or abbreviated as CDCL. Now, this committee, it came up with recommendations in this year, and it highlighted the need to supplement the Competition Act of the year 2002, which has an ex post framework, with that of ex ante framework. Now, what are these ex post and ex ante framework? We'll discuss it in the next slide. Now, this topic becomes important from GS paper 2 perspective, because first of all, it is the Competition Commission of India which is responsible for checking anti-competitive practices in Indian economy. And this particular body is a regulatory body which was established under the aegis of Competition Act. Hence, it is important from GS paper 2 syllabus, because you can see syllabus highlights regulatory and quasi-judicial bodies. Further, the syllabus also highlights government policies and intervention for development of various sectors, and this is an example of government's intervention for development of digital sector in general. So, from mains perspective, this article becomes important. Now, this article highlights the increased competition between digital companies in India, because India is increasingly becoming more and more digitally oriented by increasing penetration of internet across the country, which has made India a lucrative digital markets for both companies located in India and also foreign companies. And this increase in competition has brought several challenges. So, to address this increased competition challenge, the committee highlighted the amendment of anti-competition law, because currently the anti-competition law, which is the Competition Act of the year 2002, it has an ex post framework. Now, according to this act, there is a body called Competition Commission of India which was set up, and this Competition Commission of India is responsible for maintaining competition in Indian economy. That this body controls companies from indulging in anti-competitive practices. Now, this law empowers the Competition Commission of India through ex post framework. And by definition, the ex post framework, it means that the Competition Commission of India, it can enforce its decision on companies after the anti-competitive practice has taken place. That the Competition Commission of India can only act after the company has undertaken any anti-competitive practice. Now, this is a long-term measure which is usually takes some time to act, or it takes some time for the Competition Commission of India to enforce its decision on anti-competitive practices. So, to prevent companies from taking advantage of this time-taking process, the committee, it has suggested to supplement this ex post facto framework with that of ex ante framework. Now, this ex ante framework, it enables the body, that is Competition Commission of India, to enforce its regulation in the digital markets even before the company has undertaken any anti-competitive practice. So, you can understand through ex ante framework, the Competition Commission of India can first of all preempt and also prevent any anti-competitive practice even before that happens. So, this gives extra power to anti-competition body, which is Competition Commission of India. So, you'll be asking or wondering, why do we need ex ante framework in the first place? Now, it is important to note, because you can understand these digital companies, they enable or they want to achieve what is called as an economies of scale. That these companies, they want to further increase their size, which will enable them to reduce the amount of profit they generate per user. However, if they increase their size, it means the number of users increase in this company, and also it enables these companies to generate more and more profit put together. So to prevent these companies from achieving rapid growth, which may happen in case CCI enforces its decision after the anti-competitive practice has taken place, it will enable these companies to actively achieve rapid growth, and in a way it will also discourage competition in the economy, because otherwise you can understand these small companies will not be able to compete with larger digital companies such as Google and Facebook because of their economies of scale. And this economies of scale will also enable the large companies to outbid the smaller companies because of their large ability. Further, these digital companies also rely on what is called as a network effect. Now, these network effects can also actively discourage competition in the Indian economy. And let me help you understand this with the help of an example. Suppose all of you must have purchased goods from a site called Amazon. Now, what will happen if Amazon says that you can only pay money utilizing its own proprietary payment system, that is Amazon Pay, which means other parties such as Paytm or PhonePe will not be utilized in order to pay for goods which you purchase from Amazon. That means Amazon will try to force you to utilize its own network, which you can understand negatively impacts the competition in the sector. So, to also prevent companies from preempting or utilizing this network effects, this ex ante framework is very much required, because this ex ante framework will enable the Competition Commission of India to preempt and prevent any anti competitive practices even before they happen. Understood? Now, let us understand what are the basic frameworks of this particular amendment which has been suggested by the committee. Now, this committee makes the new digital competition bill applicable. Does it make applicable to all digital companies? The answer is no. It only makes it applicable to the companies which are dominant in nature, and these companies will be signified or labeled as a significantly or systematically significant digital enterprises. Now, this classification of dominant companies as systematically significant digital entities will be based on quantitative factors such as finances or users, and also based on qualitative factors such as their ability or presence in the identified sector. So, based on both qualitative and quantitative factors, the dominant companies will be labeled as SSD, which will make them enabled to be regulated by Competition Commission of India. Now, this bill, it also imposes several obligations on these SSDs, that it prohibits these companies to indulge in anti-competitive practices or practices which are unfair and not transparent. For example, many of these companies, they promote their own products, or they restrict third party apps. Further, these companies, they also bundle or tie many services with their own services, and also cross utilizing the data to promote their other ventures as well. So this body, it imposes obligation on these companies to not indulge in such anti-competitive practices, and it also wants to promote fairness in the country's digital economy. And what if these companies do not pay attention or do not follow these obligations? Then these companies will also be liable to be imposed by certain penalties by the regulator, that is the Competition Commission of India. So this is the basic framework, and there has been also some concerns in application of this basic framework. First of all, that this particular digital competition bill, it was modeled on European Digital Market Act. However, importing direct features of this particular act in Indian context, it has also brought some skepticism on whether this particular framework will be successful in India or not. Further, it also makes startups in India liable to be regulated by CCI because many of these startups have increased financial health and also have large number of users. So what if these startups start to be regulated under these digital competition bill? It will also reduce the amount of investment that these startups currently witness because it will make investment a costly affair, thereby discouraging investment from outside sources. Further, there are significant micro, small, and medium enterprise which rely on services provided by these digital companies. Such as, what if you start a small courier company and you utilize Google Maps to navigate your courier vehicles? So this is kind of example of services that have been offered by companies to many small companies, and the cheaper the services that these big companies offer, the more competitive are the MSMEs. However, by increasing regulation in the digital sector, it will also impact MSMEs as the cost of procuring these services will increase, thereby increasing the inflation levels in the Indian economy. So these are the related concerns, and with this we conclude our today's discussion in the mains related articles. Now, also, there are two important articles in the newspaper, that is in the Hindu and Business Line, which deals in detail with the manufacturing sector and why Indian budget should catalyze the resurgence of manufacturing sector in India. Now, I've dealt these topics in detail on 26th of June this year itself, where I discussed significance of manufacturing sector for Indian economy, what are the issues that are plaguing manufacturing, and also way forward for manufacturing sector to increase the levels of manufacturing levels in the Indian economy. So I requested that after this session ends, and please visit this particular DNS of 26th of June to know more about manufacturing sector in general. Now let us move to the next set of articles, the first of which you can see appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now the CM of Tamil Nadu has released books related to folk deities and forts in the state of Tamil Nadu, and there are also details about these hero stones which are originated in the Sangam age itself. Now various terms that have been appearing in news are also asked by UPSC in the prelims examination. Case in point, this prelims of the year 2023. So this topic becomes important from GS paper 1 syllabus because the syllabus highlights salient aspects of architecture from ancient to modern times. So in this regard, let us understand what are Nadukal or Viragalu. Now these are examples of hero stone which are established as a memorial to commemorate the death of a hero. Now these heroes, they may have died committing some heroic act, and these particular stones, they are enabled to celebrate the death of a hero. Now usually these are in a form of stone monument. However, we can also find some kind of inscription in many of these monuments. Now this practice has been prevalent in the society of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka back from the Sangam period, which dates back to 2600 years. And this practice continued even up till 29th century in the rule of Nayak and post-Nayaka period. Now the earliest and the oldest examples that we have witnessed of these hero stones, they can be found in the state of Tamil Nadu, as there has been instances of stones which are as old as 4th century before Christ. Further, a hero stone which has been witnessed, they belong to 8th century at the time of Pandya kingdom's rule. Now, even the Sangam literary works such as these, they also specifically describe heroic stones as some stones which have been commemorated or established to celebrate the death of an individual who has performed a heroic act. So, based on this information, let us now solve the practice question. Consider the following statements with reference to the practice of erecting Nadukal. The first statement, it has been mentioned in the Sangam work Ahana Naru. Now you can understand I've highlighted here that these Sangam literature examples, that is Tolkappiyam, Ahananoru, Punanurnaru, Malaikapudam and other literary works also has details about these Nadukals. So the first statement becomes correct. Now the oldest Nadukal, they are memorials found in the state of Tamilnadu and these date back to 4th century BC, and second statement is also correct. The third statement, the practice of erecting Naduaru, it involves to honor the Sangam poets, which you can understand is incorrect because it is meant to honor the death of a hero who performed a heroic act and not Sangam poets. Hence, as statement 1 and 2 are correct, therefore option A is the right answer to this practice question. Moving on to the second article of the day, which highlights that due to a new government is stated to bring a policy on minimum support price. And in recent times, we have witnessed increased protests by various farmers group who have demanded of increasing the prices that have been offered by government as MSP up till the level of C2 and more than 50% of that of C2 levels. So this news article becomes important from GS paper 3 syllabus because the syllabus directly highlights issues related to MSP, and also from the prelims point of view, questions have been directly appearing in this topic. So let us understand what is this minimum support price regime. Now this support price regime, it is announced by government, that is Cabinet Committee of Economic Affairs, at the beginning of the sowing season. Now there are 22 crops which have been covered under this regime, and I have provided the details in the notes which you can refer to after the session ends. Now these are announced based on the recommendation of Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices. Further, is sugarcane covered under the MSP regime? The answer is incorrect because it is covered under the fair and remunerative price regime and not the MSP regime. Now, how is the MSP of a particular crop fixed? Now, there are three different approaches. The first and the earlier used approach was called as an A2 method. Now, in this method, the expenditures which are incurred by farmers on various inputs such as seeds and fertilizers, they are added, and based on this addition, the government estimates the MSP. Now, this method, it witnessed a reform by adding the expenditure which are incurred by farmer or input, and we add to this the implied cost of family labor, which is in a way not paid by farmer directly. However, by adding the implied cost of labor, we achieved what is called as an A2 plus FL method. Now, the MS Swaminathan committee, it also recommended the third approach, which is known as a C2 method. Now, it adds the cost of inputs in addition to cost of family labor, but it also adds the cost of implied cost of rent of land and all other implied cost. Now, the present method of fixing MSP, it is based on A2 plus FL method, that it does not take into account the implied cost of rent of land. And the government, it is offering 1.5 times more MSP, and it calculates the MSP based on A2 plus FL method. Whereas on the other hand, the farmers or some section of farmers, they are recommending implementation of MSP which is 50% more than that of C2 cost. Understood? Now, with reference to the minimum support prices, consider the following statements. It is announced by the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs after the harvest season. This is incorrect, as I have already highlighted. It is a measure which signals the farmer to grow particular crop. Hence, these measures, they are announced at the beginning of sowing season and not after the harvest season. So, moving on to the second statement, currently the government calculates MSP by taking into account the implied cost of rent of land, which again is incorrect because current method, that is A2 plus FL method, it does not take into account the implied cost of rent of land. So, option D is the right answer, as both of these statements are incorrect. Now, moving on to the last article of the day, which highlights a report from Australian Meteorological Department, and it highlights that La Nina may emerge after the August. Now, this topic is important from GS Paper 1 syllabus because salient features of world physical geography have been mentioned in the syllabus. Further, questions appearing on various weather phenomena such as Indian Ocean dipole have been frequently occurring in the prelims examination. So, in this regard, let us understand what is this La Nina phenomena all about. But before understanding La Nina, let us understand what happens in a normal year in the region of Pacific Ocean. Now, during normal year, we witness upwelling of cold water in the South American coast, that is in the coast of Peru. And these cold waters, when they come up to surface and they meet these equatorial trade winds, they move westwards and hence become more and more warmer. And this warm water pool, as it moves towards west, it causes rainfall in the region of Southeast Asia. Now, this process of upwelling of cold water in the Peruvian coast, it intensifies in the period of La Nina, which you can see more cold water now appear in the Peruvian coast, and it also increases the amount of trade winds. Now, due to interaction with these trade winds, these cold waters eventually get warm, and these warm waters are then transported into Southeast Asian region as well as to other Asian region. Now, the impact of these La Nina conditions on the coast of South America is that it creates the conditions of drought, which is due to increased upwelling of the cold water in the region. Whereas on the other hand, in the region of Southeast Asia, due to presence of more and more warmer waters, it increases the amount of rainfall in the region, thereby creating floods like situation in Southeast Asia, and it also increases the rainfall in India. Further, in Caribbean and North American region, especially in the North region, we witness cold and wet weather. Whereas in the region of Caribbean and Southern American region, we witness rise in instances of hurricanes. So it results into increased hurricanes in the region of Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. So these are the important impacts of La Nina, that it leads to drought conditions in Southern American coast such as Peruvian coast. It increases the amount of rainfall in the Southeast Asia, Australia and India, which can result into flood-like condition in the Southeast Asia. And it also increases the instances of hurricanes, especially in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico region. So based on this information, consider the following statements. The first statement, the La Nina, it refers to an abnormal cooling of Central and Eastern Pacific Ocean waters, which you can understand it is a correct statement as I have already highlighted here, because the normal upwelling of cold waters, it gets intensified during La Nina period. Further, it leads to drought-like condition in Southeast Asia, which you can understand is incorrect, because opposite happens, that it leads to increased rainfall, which may even lead to flood-like conditions in the Southeast Asia. Further, La Nina results into increase in hurricane activity, which is again correct as I have already highlighted here. So as two statements, statement 1 and 3 are correct, hence option B is the right answer to this practice question. So with this, I conclude our today's session of Daily News Simplified, and stay tuned to our YouTube channel that will come again tomorrow at 6 p.m. sharp with analysis of tomorrow's newspaper. So until then, I bid you a very good night.